My brothers and sisters in Christ, today Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew builds upon the commandment of yesterday's Gospel, which was Matthew's version of what we heard in Luke's Gospel this past Sunday, as he sent out the disciples about taking no provision and the way they were to conduct themselves in ministry. Today, however, he adds that the acknowledgement that they're being sent out like sheep amongst wolves. But he says this fascinating line that needs our consideration, which is to be as shrewd as serpents and simple as doves. What does this mean? Ultimately, the rest of the passage's context gives the cold truth that the disciples will suffer much persecution for their preaching of the gospel, that those that don't want to hear it will sometimes reject it harshly, sometimes even perhaps violently. And this, in fact, lines up as the church celebrates the feast day of St. Benedict today, that St. Benedict himself, the great father of monasticism, spiritual father himself, his own religious community tried to poison him because they didn't like the light that the rule of St. Benedict shone on their own laziness and corruption. And so it's always been the case that walking the right path will lead to resistance. But what do we do in the face of resistance? And this is where this line about being as shrewd as serpents and simple as doves is important. Shrewd as serpents reminds that Jesus says, use your gifts of ingenuity to avoid the traps that people set for you. But simple as doves means be single-minded in purpose. Do not compromise your integrity. It's the sign of purity. And so this is a reminder that Jesus nowhere tells his disciples to seek out martyrdom. He doesn't ask them to run headlong into harm's way to be killed for the faith. And sometimes we see this in the example of some that are overly zealous, that want to, in a sense, to pick the fight, to seek the fight at every turn. And that's not what the Lord asks of us. The disciples constantly, we saw when persecutions would break out, they would just move to the next town. But what we need to do is not be afraid of the suffering. And so it's okay to avoid it when that can be prudentially done, but we don't avoid it at the compromise of the mission. And so the disciples are meant not to worry about the persecution, not to worry about threats against them, but to go about their purpose. If it comes down to suffering and martyrdom, then so be it. God will be with them. God will be with us. If it can be avoided, fine. But the important thing is to be unswerving from our purpose. And so we cannot, out of worry about fear of conflict or loss of reputation or what people might think, we can't compromise who we are, our mission, our identity in Christ. That can never be done. And if that need bring us suffering, then so be it. God will be with us. But neither do we need to charge headlong to seek out this suffering, this persecution, nor do we need to find every battle as a chance to fall on our sword as a glorious martyr. God does not ask that of us. He asks us to put our trust in him, to be who he has created us to be, and to follow his will. That is what he asks. And as long as we stick to this, there will be times of peace and great abundance. There will be times of perhaps threat and danger, but we shouldn't fear those. When we stay simple as doves, according to God's purpose, he is with us and he will provide, whether for our own shrewdness as serpents when the opportunity presents itself, or by the hand of divine providence itself. But may we be unswerving, unyielding, as God sends us out into his vineyard. May God bless you all.